Hello, everyone. My name is Bryn Boyce, and I'm the Associate Artistic Director at Commonwealth Shakespeare Company. I want to thank you for joining us today for our first installment of the Tempest Talks, a new series that will help us take a look inside our upcoming production of The Tempest. Today, we're talking to CSC's Artistic Director, Steve Mailer, who is also the director of this production. Should you need it, speech recognition captioning is being used for this talk. Just locate the CC option in the menu at the bottom of your Zoom window, click it, and select the Show Subtitles option to see the captions. If you are viewing this on a rebroadcast, hello to you too. And you should be seeing our open captioning now at the bottom of the screen. Before we start, I'd like to take a moment to recognize the Indigenous land on which we reside as an expression of appreciation, awareness, and gratitude. I am currently in Medford, Massachusetts, on colonized land in the traditional tribal territory of the Wampanoag and Massachusetts peoples. Our guest today, Steve Mailer, is in Provincetown, Massachusetts, on the land of the Nauset and Wampanoag people. We would also like to acknowledge that the digital technology that we are using together today is not available in many Indigenous communities. To learn more about CSC's work toward racial equity, including this process of land acknowledgement, please visit comshakes.org. Today's program is free, but we hope that you will consider a donation of $10 or whatever amount is meaningful to you. To donate, visit comshakes.org/donate. And I would love now to bring in our special guest, Steve Mailer. Steve, come on in.
Great to see you, Bryn. How are you today?
Great. CSC is best known for its free Shakespeare on Boston Common. We're putting together an outstanding production of The Tempest, directed by Steve and starring John Douglas Thompson as Prospero, to share with you this summer. So I have a few questions for you. That's what the Tempest Talk is. First, Steve, I know that you selected this particular play for our 25th anniversary, production before the pandemic hit, and that we're about to go into production again with it. So I'm wondering, I want to sort of ask you the director question, why this play, why now? And let us in on your thought process with this play choice, both then and now.
Sure. Well, I think when we think about what we want to sort of stage on the Boston Common, I always think about what is in the hearts and minds of people as we're moving towards that production. And for me, the things that were provocative to me about the play when I chose it some time ago were two things mainly. One was this notion of unity and coming together and overcoming strife. The play is about, two brothers who have separated and gone through a period of incredible strife, and they learn to forgive each other. Prospero in particular learns to forgive his brother for wrongs that had been done to him. And that process of forgiveness, of giving forgiveness and asking for forgiveness, is a very tempestuous one, not to quote the title of the play, but it's hard work, right? It's very, very hard work. And the journey of Prospero's forgiveness of his brother for the wrongs that had been done to him is what was provocative to me. I was also really interested in the notion of displacement and refugeeism. As we see, civic strife all over the globe, these hot spots that pop up, that through civil strife create mass migrations of people. And looking at that in that sort of microcosm in terms of Prospero and Miranda's sort of banishment from their sort of home, and how they fled their country and sort of reintegrated themselves into a new world. Who are they? What are they? Are they where they came from, or are they where they're going to? Are they on some spectrum in between those places? And I was really interested in that sense of what we carry with us as we move about from place to place, and what we learn and encounter in new spaces that we're in. So that was something that really motivated me at the very beginning of the process, thinking about those two core ideas.
Very cool. I know that there was a third sort of thematic element that you and I have had extensive conversations about. and that is colonialism. And I know that you've had a lot of, for lack of a better word, growth around your initial ideas. And I was wondering if you would
Sure.
unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the colonialism in the play is I don't think Shakespeare was writing that play about colonialism. I'm not a Shakespeare historian in any way, shape, or form, or a dramaturg. Those people are far smarter than me. I'm just a director. But I think that, that how he thought of colonialism and versus how we now think of it in our world today. And I thought of it a lot, when you just did that land acknowledgement, which, means so much to me too, as it does to you. And I sense how much that means to you. I think, we're reckoning with these plays and the history of these plays and the content of these plays in new ways. And I feel, kind of naive, frankly, about thinking about that concept of the Tempest, saying, oh, well, everybody's already done the colonial approach to the play, right? So let's focus on this notion of refugees and refugeeism, and that colonial thing is like something that everybody talked about already. And now that
we're post-colonial, everyone, right?
Right, exactly. I think I actually used that phrase at one point. And I regret that phrase deeply. And I regret, thinking that you can't have an actor can't call another actor slave on stage and have that be a moment that has to be thought about, the reverberations and echoes of that moment. That's the way that Prospero refers to both Caliban and to Ariel. So I think it's, I think what this period of reflection and reckoning has asked me to think about, and I have been thinking about, is how do we look at those issues in the play? How do we understand those issues in the play? How do we, kind of contextualize those issues for our audiences today, without ignoring the extraordinary power of the play and stepping away from the work because there's some things that we really find distasteful now. So it's an interesting process, something that's 400 years old. It's just inevitably going to have different set of cultural mores and values around it. And part of what we, thrive on at CSC is bringing these plays forward, finding why they matter today. What is it about them that matters today? And, for me, I still very powerfully feel that journey to forgiveness and that coming together of a society that's riven by civil strife. I feel that's where we are now today. And I feel that's what the play speaks to, is the difficult journey forward from civil strife to civil union. And that's what I hope we find in the play.
That's great. And I think with that lesson learned, that that your artistic journey sort of turned, and I think that that's being reflected in the design. So I'd like to talk about that next.
Sure.
First of all, speaking of designers, our audience may not know that every director has their own way in to a play. And then you have to bring that vision to the table to others, to your collaborative team. Some directors, they have to design their own sets. Some enter the world through sound and music. Some make vision boards and inspiration visuals. And some have the luxury of time and can just do everything organically. Wouldn't that be nice, Steve? And in the moment with no pre-planning, right?
You have to move to Europe to do that.
I know, right?
Where theater is subsidized in a proper way.
So can you talk, without that luxury, can you talk
Yes.
To us about your way in and how and when you bring designers in to your vision?
Sure. I mean, I think when you're working with a Shakespeare play, sort of the words are, the holy grail, really. You keep going back to the language and to the words. And, I always say about working on Shakespeare, who the genius in the room is, and it's not you. So I think I try to spend as much time in the language and in the words and understanding the words, really understanding it on a word by word basis. I think people don't recognize that that's something that actors and directors and designers do. We find it as impenetrable at times as an audience does. We have to work hard to look at all of the notes and read all the notes and understand, how does that sentence mean what it means? I understand what it means, but how does it do that? What are the mechanics of that sentence? What's the verb? What's the object?
Yeah.
What's the, what's the noun that's driving the sentence? And so that's a big part for me early on, is sort of really enmeshing myself in the work. Tina Packer once said, I think, that you never really know these plays until you direct them. And I feel so aligned with that vision, because I think the process of directing the play forces you to get into the inner workings, the minutiae of the way the play works. So I start there, and then I start with images. I think for me, though, language is, of course, the power of theater and the power of Shakespeare. It's not, I mean, film and television is the world of imagery and the world of images, but we really want to bring these pieces to vivid life. I think part of what we strive for at CSC is a very visceral and physical interpretation of the language. We don't, sort of park and bark, as they say in opera, where you just kind of come down center and where you can see the conductor and you plant yourself and you sing your aria. We like to move around. We like to physicalize the material and really bring it to vibrant physical life. And we have such extraordinary actors that we work with that have such physical dexterity and such capacity to juggle both this incredibly complex language, but also the physical embodiment of it. So I want to find those visuals that inspire me and inspire the production. So I start just rooting around on, Google image search. That's my friend. And I sort of, you get into these sort of rabbit holes of research that are incredibly exciting and incredibly wonderful. And you collect this massive bank of imagery. That some of it stays and some of it doesn't. You start that process, and then you feel like you have kind of a North Star for yourself of what the production is all about, what you're feeling in relationship to the material. And then you bring the team in and they take it to a whole new level.
And do you generally, like, I know that I sort of see costumes as one of the first things that sort of jogs me. I know that you have a really particularly special relationship with Clint, who you've worked with, Clint Ramos, who you've worked with a lot. Would you speak to that as well? Usually,
yeah, well,
work
about
for him.
Yeah, talk about the genius in the room. That's Clint. I think what I love about Clint is that his great designers are great at what they do in terms of physically designing space. Or physically designing costumes, or designing sound, or designing the lights that shape the space. But the designers that I love most working with, and Clint is certainly among them, as well as Nancy and Eric and David, all the folks that are on this team, but they get inside of the play with you. They're not just designing the set; they're actually talking about the foundation and fundamentals of the play. Who are the characters? What's the narrative? What are the themes, if you will, that we're trying to center our production around? And so I almost feel like these artists that we're lucky enough to have on our team are really co-creators at the foundational level. And the earlier that we're lucky enough to bring these people in, the better, because this is the true nature of our work, is that it is collaborative. It really is an amalgamation of ideas, that a synthesis of ideas that come together to create the production. I've never been, and I admire the Robert Wilsons of the world and those folks who have such a singular vision of the production that everyone is sort of, falls in line behind that vision. But I've never been that kind of a director. I've always been a director who wants to, bring the best ideas together and synthesize those into something that is always far more interesting than I could ever imagine it being. I think that's the power of collaboration, is that what you come up with is better than any idea of one person. It's really a synthesizing.
Well, it's cool that you say that, because I actually have some of your inspiration and image boards.
Great.
I'm going to
Terrific.
share
Let's
the
take
screen.
a look.
So for the audience, I would love for you to just kind of look at how Steve's mind went from one sort of inspiration to another. And then the last few images are of Clint's and Nancy's. And I think you'll see where they took his ideas and ran with them. So I'm going to share my screen with you real quick. Okay. So Tempest images and inspiration. Yeah. So here's the first one. Talk about this one. This isn't really.
Yes. I love this image. So, one of the big fun things about the play is the shipwreck at the very beginning, and trying to think about how to, in a stage production, how to bring this to life. You think about a true film and all of the effects and, that you can bring, and, you've got that massive, tank of water that you're going to submerge the Titanic in, and all, everybody's going to be swimming around in the water. But we can't do that in stage. We have to find something that's sort of our unique way of telling the story. So this image is a sway pole. It's hard to tell because you're looking, out at the audience, but it's this circus technique, I guess the best way to say it, where you anchor a pole in the ground, and the performer is sort of standing at the top of it, lashed to it, and they're able to sort of make the, kind of the whole pole move back and forth. And with quite careening effects as you get more and more advanced. And I've seen, travels in South and Central America. I've seen dancers who swing from poles. There's a very rich, exploration of this kind of techniques and various, kind of various cultures. But I always, I feel like I always end up going to circus artists because I'm so amazed by what they're able to do. And that's a fun rabbit hole to dive down into, by the way, too. Right. So this was a thinking about how that opening might happen, where you have all of these sailors sort of on these sway poles, sort of, and very slowly you start to see them do this and start to sort of shake and shake and sway and sway. And then as the Tempest really starts roaring, they're careening, across the stage. So that's what this image came from. And it's obviously a wonderfully theatrical image.
Right.
Too.
And that's one of the first, the sort of first images that I remember that you collected for this. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we had a bunch of circus people, right?
Yes. Right. Okay. I think every play I think about, even kitchen sink dramas, I'm like, wouldn't it be great to have circus performers in this somehow?
Well, it's the reason I kept this, because I realized this is a major skill that people go to school to do, right? And we are, in Boston on the Common, and you may not have actors who can do this thing, but as a director, you cannot censor yourself or censor your imagination when you begin pulling these ideas together, because this wild idea can spark someone's realistically done idea, right?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and I think one of the joys of my life is being in the room with great actors. And, part of what's always inspiring to me about being in the room is they're even physically capable. I think about so many performers I've worked with who are so physically adept. And you say, could you tumble out of this and jump over there and then land on his shoulders? And they do it. And you're like, how does that happen? How do you have the capacity to do that? So I'm always, trying to push my own imagination, but also push the imagination of the artists around me. But I again, always so inspired by what they're capable of doing. And that's, I think, what's unique about theater is that it's happening in front of you. We're not stopping the camera and, doing some kind of special effects. We're not bringing in a double. We're not doing it in a green screen and doing tricks. It's actually happening in front of you. And, I think when people, are able to, encounter live theater and see the narrative unfolding in front of them, there's something really magic about that. And sadly, not enough people get to see theater or go to theater. And that's, part of why CSC exists, of course, is to bring more people into this extraordinary medium.
That's awesome. So here, let's keep going. But yeah, here's
Yes.
one I also love, of the nature of the island kind of feeling. That's what I'm getting from it.
Yeah, we were trying to think about, these two clashes of culture. As I was thinking about it, the Europeans, if you will, the people who come to the island versus the people who are on the island, namely Caliban and Ariel are the two named creatures that we see, but we also have the goddesses of the island. And I'm really interested in bringing those characters forward. They kind of appear, the goddesses, appear in the wedding mask, the wedding sort of celebration and ritual for Ferdinand and Miranda. But I actually want to kind of bring them more decidedly into the narrative and more intentionally into the narrative. But starting to think about what is that, what is that sort of blend of nature and human, that are these characters like Ariel and Caliban in particular. So starting to draw on the sort of organic elements that might be out there. I'm in Provincetown now, and spending a fair amount of time out walking through the dunes and walking through the woods, and it's the nature is so rich and so wonderful and so surprising and so beautiful, and trying to capture some of that richness and beauty in our production was something I was very interested in.
That's great. So you have a series. I'm going to sort of show the series of pictures of books and detritus and collection. That's sort of something that I got out of these. And then structure. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that Prospero speaks to is that Gonzalo, who really rescued Prospero and Miranda from sure death when they were put in this little rickety old ship. She, in our version, Gonzala, we cross-gendered that role. She gave him his books from his library, his most prized books from his library. So I was interested in thinking, how do those books, fit into this world, and looking at books in unconventional settings like beaches or funky bookstores like this. Mm-hmm. It's just such a powerful part of the drama, and obviously his books are so precious to him. So I really wanted to think through like how that might be done in some special way in the production. I have this vision that like he washes up on shore in our production, and the little fragment of a boat that he and Miranda and wrapped in blankets in his arms is lined with books, like much like this image might be, so that these prized possessions are kind of nurtured and carried with him as he comes to the island. But we'll see whether this ends up in the production or not. That's the exciting thing about these early ideas, is that sometimes they make it in and sometimes they don't.
Right. So I noticed in the images that they began to turn to real structure, and the kinds of structures that you might find if you were to either wash up or just need to build shelter right where you are. Right. And right. Then just sort of lean to kind of feeling, and then it led you to this. So you sort of, sorry, I went the other direction, but so you see this idea led you to this, and this, and then the people. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, the images of these shelters were intriguing to me to think about, like how do they protect themselves from the elements? They're on this island. What is that structure, that physical structure that they create? And there's actually scores and scores of images around that I explored. But I really also wanted to zoom in on people. I think that's another thing that I find in the research that inspires me is human beings in strife, human beings in struggle. And this notion of refugeeism, which I spoke to earlier, was really captured by these, devastating images that you see, and that we've become, inured to it. We become, numbed by them. It just parades across our television, and we see, the cost and the power of civil strife. We see the fallout in human terms, and you see this young girl in this image here, so frightened and so frail and so vulnerable, at the mercy of the ocean behind her, and her father in the previous image holding her and clutching her and trying to protect her. But you also see, what I love about Miranda, and I love about this play, is that you see strength and power in her too. I love this image. This is one of my favorite, because this young woman is strong, and she's strong because she's she's lived a life of foraging and playing in the woods, and playing on the beach, building helping dad build the lean-to. And I think of this with Miranda. I really wanted a Miranda that was very physical and very much of a tomboy, for lack of a better word, but somebody who had like strength and power. And there's a scene in the play where Ferdinand is moving logs around, and I feel like she can probably do it better than he can. And she kind of takes them away from him and says, "No, you sit down. You're a little court boy. You don't have the strength to do this. I do. So you take it easy, because you're going to hurt yourself with those logs." We'll have some fun with that, I'm sure, in production.
Well, and there's a creativity to her, because she has not, thinking of like what you can do creatively if you are in a place where there isn't a lot of commerce, and these two images of sort of creativity, I thought were very moving.
Yeah, play, absolutely play. It's like people find ways to play without screens. What a concept, right?
What? So then you also have this. You sort of went to the ship, because there is a shipwreck, and there's a great little series of things that have washed ashore.
Yeah. I love these sort of hulls, these hulking kind of shells of these ships. They feel so strong, and yet they feel so frail at the same time. They feel so abandoned, like carcasses of whales that washed up on the shore. And there's something sort of powerful and sort of so broken about them too that was intriguing to me. And you're thinking about how those might become, these fragments of the ship might become some sort of shelter, or some sort of kind of home on the island was maybe part of the idea there as well.
And so at this point, that's about when you started to give the images over to the designers. And I don't want to give too many spoilers, because 2 TED Talks from now, the May TED Talk, we're hoping to talk to the designers and get them to unpack their imagery. So I'm just going to show a couple, no spoilers, but the kind of, and then you also had, I'm sorry, I forgot about these wonderful, wonderful images by, tell me his name again.
Tadao Ando. He's a Japanese architect that I deeply, deeply admire. And what I love about his work, and you can Google it, please do, because he's a genius, is this, again, I feel like every play I design, Tadao Ando's work is in the research. Again, kitchen sink, sure, we'll find a kitchen sink play, we'll find a way to get Tadao Ando into it. But particularly I love the architecture in relationship to water is something that I find really salient about his work. And these 2 images in particular kind of speak to that. And kind of you can see the continuity from those shipwrecks into this as well. One of the ideas we wanted to figure out if a way of integrating water into the set in some way. It's incredibly expensive and incredibly problematic, so it probably won't happen. But the way that water and the land play together in this play is obviously quite important. So that was why this particular architect was so resonant to me.
And then these are the two images I just wanted to, again, no spoilers, that Clint was, this is Richard Serra, the
Yes.
sort of architectural sculptor. These two images are just, they are, I have, seen the set rendering, and these two are very like, evocative of what is happening. So I think these are really cool.
Yeah.
And then to Nancy Leary,
Yes.
the costume designer, of the earth, this sort of fishnet feeling here, and then the shells of this woman's headdress, the sort of natural elements, these sort of the island ideas,
Yes.
and then how that might translate to actual garments, right? These sort of
Yes.
flowing,
Yes.
the water is represented in the costuming. So I again, no spoilers. I'm gonna stop sharing now, because we will be talking to them in our May Tempest Talk. So please come back. The April Tempest Talk, we are talking to April, it's on April Fool's Day, and it's with the Fools, Fred Sullivan and John Kuntz, who will come and talk to us about the being funny men in this play. But I also just wanted, before we sign off, to sort of talk about John Douglas Thompson and what it's like to work with him.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, no, we were lucky enough to work with John in 1997 when he played Benvolio in The Tempest. And, no asparage. I'm sorry, Benvolio in R&J. Thank you, in Romeo and Juliet.
I was like, yeah. Wait.
And not to disparage wonderful actors who have played that role, but it's not the go-to role. It's not the role that everybody's dying to have on their resume, right? It's hard. It's really hard. He reports a lot that happens off stage. But critical things, it's things that happen off stage and things that happen on stage that the audience has just witnessed. He then has to recount that to people who were off stage when the events happened. So it requires, someone who can be an amazing storyteller, so interesting that what the audience has just witnessed, they're interested in hearing it again from him.
Yeah.
So he, that was, I think, the first time I worked with him, and it was, an incredibly joyful process. And he is the nicest man in the world. He's so gregarious and so charming. I just was on the phone with him yesterday, and just hearing the exuberance of his voice just warmed my heart up. But one of the things that's so wonderful is that John has emerged as probably one of the greatest classical actors in America today. And that's not hyperbolic. That is the truth. I think you could ask many, many people in our industry, and they would say he is one of the great Shakespearean actors in our community. And the fact that he, is also just a lovely person makes it such a joy to be in the room with him, and such a joy to encounter these difficulties and challenges that the plays present, because you have a partner. And, I think when I think of all of the great, wonderful artists that I've worked with over the years, and those lead roles in particular, it truly is a partnership. It's a partnership with everybody, but you're in the room with somebody playing that role, or playing Hamlet, or playing Macbeth, or you're in the room with them, 42 hours a week. It's an intense journey that you go through with those actors that take on those eponymous roles. And, to have that kind of partnership with John is just so wonderful to me. It's a real gift to us and to Boston that we're going to be able to experience his genius. He is so in demand, and so, between film and television and theater opportunities, I'm so thrilled about having the opportunity to share his genius with our community.
Yeah, it's a great privilege. It's awesome. And that leads
It's
me
exactly right. It's a privilege. I think that's really the way to think of it. And, it's his mind, it's his dexterity with the language, it's his intimate connection with the material, his empathetic connection with the material. He brings the material to life in such a specific and unique way, that every word is just ravishing. He's extraordinary.
He is. And I think probably the most important question that people probably have in their minds right now about taking all of this into consideration is what, considering the pandemic, what can you say about what may be happening this summer? Can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, this has been one of the most difficult periods of my adult life, and for a lot of reasons. One is, the pandemic has brutally affected arts organizations, and we're all trying to find ways to navigate this. But even more catastrophic, frankly, is what this has done to individual artists and artisans. And it's been a cascading series of crises, because many artists subsidize their lives through their creative lives through working in restaurants or working in the gig economy, and that has been so devastatingly impacted by the work, so by the pandemic. So we've been doing everything we can to continue to engage artists, to move them to the front, to create projects, to hire them, to celebrate them in every way we can. And we are so desperate to be back on the Boston Common, with our audiences and with our artists. I think as we look at that and think what the opportunities are ahead, it is so wonderful to see people vaccinated and see people being vaccinated. Every friend of mine on Facebook who posts that they got their first shot, I just shout out, enjoy. It's like it's starting to work. Like science is starting to work again. So I'm very, very optimistic about a return to live theater. The question is just a timing one, and like how that's all going to work out. And so for us at CSE, our primary responsibility and concern is of the safety of our artists and our artisans that work on the project, and our audiences. So every decision that we make about the summer ahead is going to keep that in terms of primary focus. But we're working closely with the city of Boston to try to figure out what kind of iteration of Shakespeare on the Common we can do this summer in a safe way. And I'm really excited about things that we're working on that we're not quite ready to share yet, but we're very, very close to being able to share some plans and news for the summer. But we all so want to be on the Common again. We so want to be in theaters watching our friends work at the other theater companies. We want the ballet company up and running again, with the opera company up and running again. We want everybody back. We want everybody back, but we want everybody back safely. And we want to sustain this growth of the company, of the community on the other side. There's so much that we've learned, I think, in this period, and so much more work to do. And that's where we're headed.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. And as we wrap up, thank you so much, Steve, for being my guest on Tempest Talk. And as we wrap up, please do not forget, everyone, audience, to follow us on social media platforms. Our handle is @ComShakes. We're on all of them. Please follow us. Please like us. We'll also be posting this recording of the Tempest Talk tomorrow at noon on Facebook and social media, other places, for others who might have missed out. So many thanks to all of you who've joined us. Thank you, Steve, our fearless leader, for spending some time Tempest talking tonight.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
See ya.